They didn't find your yard by accident. Right now, your home is broadcasting this invisible signal that 100 hidden eyes have been waiting for all year, and you had absolutely no idea you were sending it. Maybe you looked outside this morning, or maybe it was yesterday, or even last week, and you just noticed something was different. The trees were fuller than usual. Not with leaves, though. With movement. Dozens of birds where there were none before, just completely occupying your branches, gutters, fence lines, even the edge of your roof. Species you don't normally see together either. It's a density of life that feels, I don't know, weighted somehow. Like the yard is holding its breath. Most people just glance out the window and think, the weather must be changing. Or maybe the neighbors put up a new feeder. And then they just go back inside. But here's what most people don't realize. Those birds didn't arrive together by coincidence. They didn't just drift in from different directions and happen to land on your specific address at the exact same moment. What you were actually looking at was the end result of a decision, a collective, coordinated, multi-stage decision that began days before a single bird ever touched down in your yard. Your property was selected, evaluated, and approved. The real question is, by what system? And why did your yard specifically pass the test? And this is where it gets interesting, because the first thing you have to understand is that what you saw wasn't a flock behaving normally. Think back to it for a second. Were they feeding? Were they calling out? Were they moving through with that loose, casual energy of birds just passing from one place to another? Probably not. What you most likely saw was this total stillness right at the perimeter. Birds lined up along the top of your fence, positioned perfectly along the gutter line, sitting at intervals that look almost architectural, evenly spaced, facing outward, oriented toward the very edges of your property instead of the center. They're making these slow, synchronized adjustments that aren't just the random fidgeting of resting birds. It looks, if you watch it long enough, completely deliberate. That is not a flock at rest. That right there, that's a defensive perimeter formation. And what it means is the birds at the center of your yard, the ones you probably just dismissed as the main group, those are the most vulnerable ones. They're surrounded by a rotating ring of watchers whose entire job is to hold the sight lines while everyone else recovers. Something drove them here, and it was urgent enough that they had to set up this protective formation the second they hit the ground. But here's what's actually happening beneath the surface. Days before that group even showed up in your yard, scouts were already in the neighborhood. Not the whole flock, just a few individuals running what etologists call a risk-reward audit. Basically, they were grading properties. They were mapping out water access, food density, signs of predators, and your own activity patterns. They were even looking at canopy coverage and the geometry of escape routes. Your yard was on that list. So are your neighbors'. So is the park 3 streets over. But it's not just about the resources. This is the part people miss. The scoring is really about safety architecture. A yard with tons of food but wide open sightlines, no bushes, no layered trees, nowhere to actually disappear. That scores way lower than a yard with just okay food but dense cover. A yard where a cat prowls every day scores lower than one where the main, large mammal is a human with a predictable routine who mostly stays inside. Your yard passed that audit. Whatever combination of factors your property has, that's the invisible signal. It's not a sound or a smell. It's a pattern of conditions. And when a scout processed those against what the flock needs to survive, it came back as a green light. Honestly, it kind of changes everything about how you look at your own backyard. But why this week? Why this specific season? Why not last month or even last year? Think about this for a second, because the answer isn't actually in your yard at all. Somewhere within a few miles of your house, something collapsed. Maybe a field got cleared overnight, mechanically harvested, leaving thousands of insects and seeds suddenly buried under compacted dirt. Or maybe a hedgerow was ripped out for a new development, destroying a roosting corridor that dozens of species relied on for shelter. It could even be a water source that dried up faster than usual, a pond, a drainage ditch, or a corner of a park that usually holds moisture through the summer but didn't make it past early autumn this year. To us, these collapses are completely invisible. They happen at a scale we just don't track. The loss of a single hedge, the draining of one field, we don't notice. But for the birds that depended on them, it triggers what basically amounts to an emergency backup plan. The flock didn't just decide to show up in your yard out of nowhere. They were displaced from somewhere else. And your yard was what their scouting network flagged as the closest, most viable alternative. So, what looks like a pleasant, seasonal abundance of wildlife from your window? From their side of the glass, it's a full-on crisis response. And this is the part that makes it personal. Out of all the properties those scouts looked at, they landed on yours, not your neighbor's yours. And if you look closely at what makes your yard different, the answer almost certainly includes you. See, birds in suburban areas build highly detailed behavioral profiles of the humans attached to each property, not what you look like, but your patterns. The exact time your back door opens. Whether the movement inside your house is calm or chaotic, they're tracking whether the large, slow-moving mammal inhabiting this territory is predictable, or if it moves in sudden, irregular bursts that look like a threat. They notice if kids or dogs or other high-energy variables are constantly disrupting the noise levels. Your specific daily routine, the way you walk through your home, when you come and go, how much noise your life naturally makes, it's all a variable in their scoring matrix. A quiet, predictable human creates a much safer acoustic environment than an unpredictable one. And a safer environment is a resource, just as real as food or water. The birds didn't just choose your yard. In a measurable, documented biological sense, they chose you. But here's the thing nobody really tells you, and it completely reframes everything. Gathering in large numbers is actually one of the most dangerous things a bird can do. A big flock is highly visible. It's loud. It disrupts the normal background noise of a neighborhood in a way that every predator within range notices immediately. Hawks, foxes, they all know exactly what a crowded group of prey animals means. They start moving toward it within minutes. So the decision to gather like this, to override that deep, hardwired instinct to stay scattered and hidden, is never made lightly. It means the threat of staying isolated, of facing that resource collapse all alone, was calculated to be more dangerous than the risk of being seen together. That is a desperate calculation. It means the birds in your yard right now aren't there because things are great. They're there because conditions somewhere else got bad enough that this exposed, visible gathering became the safer option, and they made that choice at the individual level. Each bird ran its own survival equation, and each one arrived at the exact same answer independently. The flock didn't come together because they were following orders. It happened because 100 individual decisions, all processing the same environmental emergency, all pointed to the exact same coordinates. Your coordinates. So, go ahead and look at your yard again. But try to look at it the way they actually see it. That patch of lawn you mow on weekends? To them, that's a thermal pocket. See, shorter grass warms up way faster in the morning sun. It creates this tiny microclimate where insects start to rise, and it gives cold, exhausted birds a place to stand and raise their core temperature without burning through their energy. And those shrubs along your fence line? That's not just landscaping. It's a layered escape matrix. We're talking multiple entry and exit points at different heights, an interior density that predators can't fly through at speed, and canopy coverage that completely breaks the sight lines from above. Even that puddle that forms in the low corner of your garden after it rains, honestly. That might be the single most valuable feature on your entire property. Because clean, accessible water right at ground level, where a small bird can approach from multiple directions, that is rarer in a residential neighborhood than almost any other survival resource. You built a sanctuary. You just didn't realize you were doing it. And that's really what I want to leave you with. The rush of wings outside your window isn't just some pleasant seasonal quirk. It's a message. It is a direct, biological communication from a wild network that has been quietly auditing our human world for signs of safety, and it found one at your address. They can't tell you about what's been lost in the landscape around you, you know? They can't explain the field that's gone, the hedgerow that got pulled out, or the water that dried up, but they can show you, and they showed you by landing. The fact that they chose your yard out of every single option within range means that something about the way you inhabit your space, the way you move, the plants you've kept, the quiet you've maintained, has been communicating safety to the wild world for a lot longer than you knew. This isn't a coincidence, it's a relationship, one that was forming completely without your knowledge and one that now maybe you can choose to lean into. So tell me, when you saw them all gathered out there, what was your first instinct? Did something in you already sense that it actually meant something? Leave a comment below. I think more of you felt it than are willing to admit.